We can't. They are too powerful, and you have to take them by force. And I moved.
But for ordinary people on the streets of Iraq, it doesn't make much difference whether it's a terrorist or an insurgent. They're still killing them, aren't they? You've got to deal with both of them in the end.
Well, terrorists, you need to deal with them in a harsh way, because they really have been hurting the Iraqi people. They have been killing civilians. They have been executing, chopping heads, and things which are very vulgar and unacceptable by any human standards. And this is a group that need to be dealt with very fiercely. There is no other way in dealing with terrorists and terrorism. But with insurgency, the solution really is political, it's not military. And this is where I can see now the American administration is convinced that this is the route to sorting out the problems in Iraq.
All right,
it's political, not military.
That brings us on to a question, please, from Fatima Raja. Fatima Raja.
How different is your vision from that of the US and the UK?
Well, first of all, my vision is really to get Iraq away from sectarianism, to build institutions which are capable, loyal to the state.
And Britain and the US don't want that?
Pardon?
Britain and the US don't want that?
The US laid down the country on the road of sectarianism, unfortunately. And this was one of the mistakes, the strategic mistakes that have been committed. The US have dismantled the institutions in Iraq. And this was, again, a very strategic mistake. And I highlighted this in editorials which I written myself in the Washington Post and New York Times, warning the United States that this is going to be a very grave, it will have very grave consequences. You know, we would like to have the United States and Britain as our friends, as our allies, but we have to maintain our Iraqi criteria, our Iraqi identity, and to preserve our culture and to preserve the unity of our country. Our country does not acknowledge, and our society, that there are Shias and Sunnis and Christians and Kurds. We have been one people. We should remain one people. We are part of the Arab world. We are part of the Islamic world, and we need to stick to this. So these are the basic differences between me and between our friends in the West.
Have you lost faith in America now?
Well, unfortunately, it's not a matter of losing faith, but I cannot see.
You don't think they have a vision?
They don't have a strategy. They need to reevaluate the whole strategy in fighting terrorism and to make a distinction between the identities, the goodwill of the people of the various regions in the Middle East, including, of course, Iraq, and between the terrorists.
Gentleman at the back.
Mr. Allawi, a few minutes ago, Mr. Sebastian asked you, do you have no blood on your hands? You answered him, no. 1 million deaths are Iraqi casualties in Iraq since 2003. Invasion of the United States to Iraq, it's the same invasion that you supported. I ask you, who do you hold responsible for these 1 million souls? And the answer is not Saddam Hussein, because he was held captive by the US forces early December 2003.
I don't know from where you got this million casualties or dead in Iraq. I don't have these figures, but definitely there are numbers of people who have lost their lives. I can't pin down exactly what the numbers were and what the numbers are, but this is an unfortunate turn of event that happened in Iraq. It is the fault of all Iraqis and the fault together of the multinational forces and the fault of the ex-regime, of Saddam's regime. As I was saying earlier, if it wasn't the problems that Saddam had created in Iraq and the region and the world and exposed the region to...
Saddam was no more there. The US government was in charge when that happened.
Which one?
The US government was in charge.
No, Saddam occupied Kuwait. The US did not occupy Kuwait.
Saddam... I think he's talking about much later.
These casualties are since 2003, since the invasion. Saddam was no more in charge.
I don't know. From where do you have the million...
So you said it's the fault of Iraqis. You blame Iraqis for these casualties.
Yeah, partly to be blamed, yes. Partly the Iraqis to be blamed.
Thank you very much, sir. I made my point.
You say you blame Iraqis, and you also wrote in your article, who could have imagined that Iraq would be in such crisis more than 4 years after Saddam Hussein?
The Iraqi politicians are to be blamed.
Well,
yes,
the Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee in May, said that months before the invasion of Iraq, US agencies predicted that it would be likely to spark violent sectarian divides and provide al-Qaeda with new opportunities in Iraq and Afghanistan. So they clearly predicted what was going to happen. So people did. There were plenty of warnings that this would turn into a bloodbath in Iraq, weren't there? Here is the Senate Intelligence Committee now releasing what US intelligence agencies were telling them before the war started.
I don't know how accurate the US intelligence community should have been insisting on not dismantling the institutions in Iraq. I think the whole problem really came with dismantling the institutions.
But you say, who could have predicted the violence? Well, they predicted the violence.
Well, everybody predicted the violence of certain degree of revenge, because then there was tyranny in Iraq, but not to the extent that we are witnessing today. And if we had preserved the institutions, nothing would have happened. Marginal fraction of what have happened would have happened.
Let's take a question, please, from Sheikha Al-Suwaidi.
Are you in favor of the execution of the former Iraqi leaders?
Not the way he was executed.